Before we start, I'd like to mention content warnings. Along with basic information about the video and the project this video is part of, you can find any content warnings for and other important information about this video in the description. Supernatural, Sherlock, Shadowhunters, Rizzolian Isles, Once Upon a Time, Riverdale. Although they vary in style, content, and theme, these shows all have one thing in common: queerbaiting. Queerbaiting is the practice of a piece of media alluding to, hinting at, providing subtext to indicate that, or otherwise implying that one or more characters are gay without ever having any meaningful realization of that gayness. But what does this look like? A prime example of queerbaiting is this scene from Sherlock. Watson and Holmes go into a restaurant for dinner, where the waiter greets them and the following exchange takes place.
Sherlock, anything on the menu, whatever you want, free, on the house for you and for your date.
Do you want to eat?
I'm not his date.
This man got me off a murder charge.
Now, this looks relatively benign. By itself, this scene is one gay joke, and those in and of themselves are another problem, but we're talking about what happens when you put a lot of those as a repeated element in a show. And not a few seconds later, this exchange happens.
You don't have a girlfriend then?
Girlfriend? No, not really my area.
All right. Do you have a boyfriend? Which is fine, by the way.
I know it's fine.
So you've got a boyfriend?
No.
Right, okay. You're unattached, like me. Fine. Good.
John, I think you should know that I consider myself married to my work, and while I'm flattered by your interest, I'm really not looking for anything.
No, I'm not asking. No. I'm just saying, it's all fine.
Good.
It may not be obvious to everyone who watches it, but to me, the subtext here is pretty clear. Sherlock and Watson especially, are both closeted gay men who are too nervous to make the first move. If you critically analyze many Sherlock scenes, this same sort of tension and dynamic pops up a lot, from when Sherlock appears to ask Watson on a date.
I need to get some air. We're going out tonight.
Actually, I've got a date.
What?
To where two people who like each other go out and have fun.
That's what I was suggesting.
To when Watson desperately tries to convince Irene Adler of his heterosexuality.
You jealous?
We're not a couple.
Yes, you are.
Who the hell knows about Sherlock Holmes? But for the record, if anyone out there still cares, I'm not actually gay.
This happens a lot. Many TV series will use different kinds of moments or subtext. Supernatural is particularly fond of the "they're just really good friends" method. Actors on screen will proclaim their love for each other or talk about how they have a special bond, which the writers of the show will then later say is purely platonic. Some just flat out have characters pretend to be gay, then never seriously mention it again. Every one of these shows does queerbaiting differently, but they all still do it. Queerbaiting is further complicated by the fact that it's quite often invisible. Until I realized I was queer, I was completely unaware of it. But once I started looking for it, queerbaiting started popping up everywhere. Queerbaiting being invisible to non-LGBTQ plus folk is a large part of why it happens in the first place. If gay people can be strung along by subtly false representation, homophobes can comfortably deny to themselves that anything remotely gay is happening, and uninformed straight people think it's a good show, showrunners end up making a lot of money. So, what does queerbaiting do? Why is it a bad thing? Quite simply, queerbaiting sends the message that LGBTQ plus people and relationships are unimportant. By hinting at but never delivering on these queer relationships, these shows tell us that these relationships exist, but shouldn't be talked about or be something to be proud of. They tell me that my queerness is something to be ashamed of, and certainly not something deserving of a happy ending. This is made even worse because media reflects not only how you see yourself, but how everyone sees each other. Every piece of media that queerbaits not only tells me as a queer person that I am not worthwhile, it tells you that too. Despite evidence you or I may have from personal experiences and interactions, queerbaiting affects us. It's also terribly isolating. That's because queerbaiting and misrepresentation in general clash with lived experiences. Our culture places a lot of value on media. Our most beloved figures are YouTube stars, actors, musicians, and comedians. When I or another queer person sees media that queerbaits, it's conflicting. To know that you shouldn't be ashamed of who you are, yet to be told over and over again that you should be, is not an easy thing to endure. So why does this happen? Quite simply, the creators and writers of these shows don't value LGBTQ plus individuals. They operate under the mistaken belief that it is impossible to make a good and successful show about openly gay people. Instead of looking at previously successful shows with good representation, they will try to play it safe, only including just enough gay subtext to entice people and string them along, but never enough to have any sort of meaningful resolution. Regardless of whether it is intentional or not, it is still damaging. Taken in isolation, each show that queerbaits is a narrative choice. Taken together, they are indicative of a systemic issue. One of the best ways to work against queerbaiting and its harmful effects is to promote and support safe spaces online. The internet has been one of the biggest boons to the LGBTQ+ community in history. The ability to circumvent traditional geographic barriers to make friends, learn, or discuss topics is invaluable, and it is the job of all of us to keep it a place where those disadvantaged by our society can heal and connect. One type of online space that can be especially helpful is fandom websites and communities. While there is a lot of stigma surrounding fanfiction and fandom in general, being able to have versions of stories that healthily portray yourself is therapeutic. Being able to look at a show that has wronged you by queerbaiting and say, no, this is my truth and this is what I want to happen, and have that be a real story, even if it's not written by the same writers who wrote the show, is extremely validating. Another way to have a lot of impact and to affect change is to support the right media. Vote with your wallet. The more well-known and positive examples of representation and clear LGBTQ+ relationships there are, the harder it is for showrunners to ignore them. When the first well-grossing shows about queer people started coming out, they took notice. If shows have positive and fulfilling representation, people take notice. And when shows systematically reinforce harmful norms that keep us suffering, we will notice and take our money elsewhere. Now, if you're a person who doesn't identify as queer or LGBTQ+, here are a few tips to help recognize queerbaiting. Are there jokes about being gay? Is there sexual tension between same-gender characters? Does nothing ever happen with this? That's queerbaiting. Queerbaiting is everywhere. It persists from our television to our books, our movies to our plays. Although it can be hard to see and often even harder to fight, it must be destroyed. LGBTQ+ people are valid, valuable, and deserve to be able to see ourselves in media and the world around us. Half-assed attempts at representation should not and cannot be accepted as good enough anymore. Thanks for watching. If you're interested more in queerbaiting, you can check out my Tumblr or the Facebook page I created for this project. The links for both of those pages are in the description of this video and on the screen right now. If you have any questions, you can ask me through those platforms. Thanks again for watching.